Back in the 1980s, everyone thought I was crazy, including my father, Mr. Walker, the wealthiest man in all of Boston's old money district.
Why?
Because instead of marrying one of the three so-called perfect men he adopted and raised for me, Daniel Carter, the golden boy of the military, Ethan Morgan, the rising star in politics, or Ryan Bennett, a business genius already making waves on Wall Street, I told him I wanted to marry a cold, quiet man named Matthew Evans, a divorced veteran with 3 children from a previous marriage. My father literally dropped his antique cigarette holder and stared at me like I had grown horns. He asked, "Are you possessed, Madeline? You've had your eyes on Daniel since you were a kid, and you're supposed to walk down the aisle with him in 7 days. You know I support that match too, right?" But my voice trembled as I said, "No, Dad. I want to marry Matthew Evans." I couldn't hold back the tears when I looked at him, not because I was unsure, but because the man standing in front of me was still healthy and full of life. In my previous life, trying to secure a better future for me, my father drained his entire fortune on dowries for 3 lavish weddings. And each time, my so-called husbands died shortly after marrying me. Daniel died on the battlefield a month into our marriage. Ethan was assassinated on our wedding day. Ryan died of poison the moment we signed the marriage license. I became the infamous widow curse, the woman no man dared marry. But it wasn't until after my death that I learned the bitter truth. None of them died. They had all faked it and gone abroad with my stepsister Samantha Walker, laughing behind my back as they played the perfect, loyal husbands, just not to me. The betrayal made my blood freeze. When I woke up in my teenage body, back in the moment my father asked me who I wanted to marry, I knew I wasn't going to play the same game again. When I reminded him about the long-forgotten verbal engagement with Matthew that had been made years ago, his face darkened. The Evans family had power too, and he feared that I'd be bullied in a marriage with them, so he set up the idea of grooming 3 custom-built husbands instead. Well, those custom-built men drained us of everything, then ran off to play hero for Samantha, leaving my father to die craving one last bite of bread. Not this time. This time, I'd marry the one man who hadn't betrayed me and had no interest in being my father's project. I left the study and ran into the 3 of them lounging casually around Samantha like she was some sort of fragile princess in a white dress. Their laughter died instantly when they saw me. In the past, I would have been furious, picked a fight with her, lashed out.
But now?
I didn't even blink. I turned to go upstairs, ready to close the door on them forever until someone grabbed my wrist. "Didn't you hear Samantha calling you?" Daniel's tone was sharp, defensive. Samantha dropped to her knees, fake tears rolling down her face, and said, "Maddie, I didn't mean to steal your engagement. I just can't help who I love." I didn't flinch. Daniel lifted her off the floor like a knight shielding his damsel and growled, "Enough, Samantha. It's not your fault. The Walker family pressured me into this whole marriage thing out of gratitude. Maddie, I'll never marry you. My heart belongs to Samantha. If you really cared about me, you'd let me go." I stared at him, half shocked, half amused. So Daniel was reborn too? Interesting. But it didn't matter. I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. "Fine," I said calmly. "I'll let you go." But Daniel scoffed. "Do you think I believe you? Planning to drug me again, like you tried last year?" Before I could respond, Ethan and Ryan jumped in with sneers. "Everyone knows our precious Maddie tried to trap Daniel at his birthday party. You practically threw yourself at him." I clenched my fists. That stupid rumor had haunted me for years. I'd explained it 1,000 times it wasn't me who drugged him. But no one cared. Then, like fate itself knew I needed a lifeline, the butler's voice echoed through the hall. "Mr. Evans is here." The air shifted. Daniel, Ethan, and Ryan all stiffened like dogs hearing the name of a true alpha. Matthew Evans was everything they pretended to be: quiet, commanding, unbothered by power games. They scattered. I heard his boots on the stairs and suddenly felt nervous. Was Dad that fast at contacting him? My thoughts short-circuited when he handed me a box. "This is your wedding dress for next week," he said casually. I looked up, stunned. "You agreed?" "Of course," he said, lips curving. "I've admired you for a long time, Miss Walker." There was something in the way he said it, playful, but confident, that made my face heat up. I darted into my room, the box clutched to my chest, trying not to smile like a fool. I could still hear his soft chuckle through the door, and damn it, I liked it. But before I could get too comfortable, there was another knock. Persistent. Annoyingly so. I yanked the door open, and of course it was Daniel. "Who else would it be?" he said bitterly. "I'm marrying Samantha. If you bless us now, we'll still consider you family." "And if I don't?" I asked. He narrowed his eyes. "Then the Walker family may find itself on the bad side of 3 very powerful men." My heart dropped. In my last life, I had forgotten how cruel they could be when crossed. "Fine," I said. "I bless you. But how do you plan to repay my father for raising you?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'll give up everything. I'll leave the country with Samantha and never look back." I didn't expect that. Daniel had spent years climbing the military ladder, was praised by generals, hailed as a national treasure. And now he was willing to throw it all away for Samantha? That's when he said it. "You were never the one who saved us during that snowstorm in Tibet. It was Samantha. She risked her life to climb the mountain and dig us out. Since that moment, we vowed to protect her forever." My stomach flipped. That snowstorm. I remembered every second of its freezing air, the blood on my hands, the pain. I was the one who saved them. But Samantha had stolen that story too. "Are you laughing?" Daniel asked. I was. Because now it all made sense. The way their loyalty flipped. The way they adored her. She had stolen my story and turned me into the villain in my own life.
And now?
They were all about to find out exactly who I really was. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was worried, but because I couldn't stop thinking about how easily they twisted my past into Samantha's fairy tale. The memory of the avalanche was burned into my bones, yet somehow she became the one wrapped in their gratitude and devotion while I got slapped with the desperate schemer label. I wasn't the type to cry over spilled lies anymore, though. If they wanted to worship a thief, so be it. I had bigger things to do, like get ready for the wedding that would finally give me a life worth living. But apparently Samantha had other plans. The next morning, as I passed the downstairs parlor, I saw her perched on the velvet couch like some kind of porcelain saint, whispering sweetly to my father about how she hoped I could find peace and forgive her one day. She had her hand delicately placed over her heart like a Disney villain mid-monologue. I didn't even blink. I just walked past her and headed straight for the attic. That place hadn't been touched in years, but it was where I had hidden away all the memories. I swore I'd forget: the letters, the drawings, the half-finished gifts I'd once made for the 3 of them like some lovesick teenager. I went through it all and tossed everything into a box. It felt like scraping off a layer of skin, but it was necessary. I was burning the past to make room for something real. That night, I fell asleep exhausted, my limbs heavy with relief. But of course, peace is never free in this house. I woke up not in bed, but tied up, crammed into a closet with my mouth gagged and wrists bruised. Through the narrow gap, I could see Samantha spinning in front of the mirror, humming while trying on my wedding dress like she was auditioning for an evil stepsister role. The knock at the door came just as she finished twirling. I watched, horrified, as the door opened and Daniel stepped in without hesitation and kissed her like they hadn't just sold their souls. Samantha moaned softly, but not before glancing toward the closet toward me with a smile so smug I wanted to scream. "What should we do after you marry my sister?" she whispered, all breathy and fake. "Easy," Daniel replied, tracing her jaw. "We'll stage her death. Ryan and Ethan will mourn publicly, and I'll disappear. Then the 4 of us can be together, just like we planned."
4.
Not 2.
4.
I shut my eyes, ball rising in my throat, because I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go. I had died once already in my past life, but the pain of this betrayal still hit like a truck. When Samantha finally opened the closet, I was crying not out of fear, but fury. She stood there in my dress, bruises of lust all over her body, looking at me like she'd already won. You always acted so perfect, she hissed. But you were born lucky. Everything handed to you. I was just the maid's daughter. The reject, the shadow. So I decided to take everything you had and now I have. I couldn't hold it in. I slapped her across the face, but she smiled as she flung herself backwards and started screaming like I'd stab her. She tumbled down the stairs right as the others arrived. Daniel ran to her side, holding her like a fallen angel, while Ryan and Ethan glared at me like I was a monster. Don't blame her, Samantha whimpered. It's my fault. I stole you from her. My voice cracked as I tried to explain that she fell on purpose, but no one believed me. I thought you'd learn not to force love, Daniel sneered. Guess not. The next thing I knew, Ryan and Ethan were dragging me to the basement, locking me in the family's old confinement room, a relic my father had once used to punish disobedient heirs. I screamed until my throat tore, but they didn't care. They knew about my claustrophobia. They knew. And they still left me there. My body started to fail me, chest tightened, vision blurred, and everything inside me screamed that this was the end. But just when I was about to pass out for good, the door slammed open and the sound of heavy boots came rushing in. My last breath caught as I saw Matthew Evans kneeling over me, his strong hands gently lifting me out like I weighed nothing. The light blinded me as I faded out again. When I woke up 5 days later in a hospital room, the first thing I saw was my father's tear-streaked face. Maddie, he whispered, you scared the hell out of me. Then I noticed them, Daniel, Ethan, and Ryan kneeling at the foot of my bed, their faces hollow. Dad, I rasped, ignoring them. Forget it. The wedding's the day after tomorrow. Let's go home. He hesitated but nodded, and I could see the confusion on their faces like ghosts realizing they weren't the center of the universe anymore. In the car, I said nothing. I just stared out the window and planned the final purge. The moment we got home, I went back to the attic and finished the job. Every trinket, photo, letter, and love token gone. My history with them was officially dead. When I was done, it was late. I collapsed into bed, only to be dragged into another nightmare before the dawn. The wedding day was coming, and the monsters in sheep's clothing were still trying to ruin it. But this time, I was ready to fight. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, I woke up earlier than usual, my body running on vengeance rather than sleep, and the first thing I did was double-check every door, every lock, every window. I wasn't going to give Samantha another chance to sneak in and pull some Lifetime movie stunt. But the universe apparently decided to serve drama on its own. Around noon, I stepped into the dining hall to check the flower arrangements and walked straight into a scene that made my blood go cold. Samantha was sitting there, all dolled up in my wedding gown again, casually sipping tea like this was her bridal shower. You're early, she chirped without looking up. But that's okay. I'm sure you'll make a beautiful backup bride. I didn't even blink. Get out of my dress. She tilted her head, then pouted. Why are you so hostile, Maddie? Don't you see? This dress looks better on me. Matthew deserves someone who doesn't carry the curse of death. I was about to snatch the cup from her hand and pour it over her synthetic curls when the butler interrupted us, flustered and pale. Miss Walker, there's a problem in the bridal suite. I rushed upstairs, and what I found nearly made me throw up. Ryan and Ethan had broken in and ransacked everything. My gown was shredded, my jewelry missing, and a bottle of red wine reeking with something suspicious was lying half-spilled across the bed. It didn't take a genius to figure it out. They were trying to ruin May again. But I wasn't that helpless girl from my past life anymore. I ordered every servant out of the house except for 2 trusted maids and locked the doors. If they wanted war, they'd get it. That night, I barely slept. I could feel the tension under my skin like electricity before a storm. And sure enough, on the morning of the wedding, it all exploded. Just hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, I was gagged, tied up, and stuffed back into the same damn closet. Samantha had outdone herself. This tiny gown was missing entirely, replaced with some grotesque white rags, and my wrists were raw from the rope. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited. Because I knew something they did in this wedding wasn't going to go how they planned. When the driver my father hired showed up and found the house empty and locked, he called for backup. By the time they busted in, I'd already freed myself, bruised but breathing. I slapped on a fresh face, yanked on the emergency gown I'd hidden days ago, and walked out like nothing had happened. My heels clicked against the church steps as I arrived fashionably late, but undeniably alive. Inside, the guests were already whispering, wondering why the bride was missing. And just as the officiant was about to call off the ceremony, the doors flew open. Ryan and Ethan were standing there like smug villains in a bad soap opera, and Ethan took the mic with a grin that made my stomach turn. Unfortunately, our dear Matthew won't be joining us today. Looks like someone got cold feet. The room gasped. A few people turned toward me with pity, and I braced myself to take the humiliation head-on. But before I could say a word, another voice echoed through the chamber. Who said I wouldn't show up? All heads turned as Matthew Evans strode in, every inch the definition of composed masculinity, wearing his full-dress uniform like he'd stepped off a movie set. The energy in the room flipped instantly. Gasps turned into awe. Some guests even clapped without realizing it. Ethan and Ryan paled like ghosts. I didn't even wait for them to speak. I stormed forward, yanked the mic from Ethan's stunned grip, and announced loud enough for the rafters to shake. Everyone, meet my husband, Commander Matthew Evans. Matthew took my hand right on cue, his fingers intertwining with mine like they'd always belonged there, and flashed the kind of smile that shut everyone up. Applause exploded. The room lit up. And yet the bitter looks on Ryan and Ethan's faces told me they weren't done playing games. Wow. Ryan sneered just loud enough to be heard. How much did your daddy pay him to put on this performance, Maddie? Ethan added, I mean, come one of everyone knows Commander Evans is way out of your league. He's not going to settle for damaged goods. Their words would have cut deep once. But today, I didn't flinch. Because I had receipts, and so did Matthew. He stepped forward, still holding my hand, and smiled politely as he said, I'm not blind. I know the difference between a real diamond and cubic zirconia. And I'm not stupid enough to disrespect the woman who saved my life. You could feel the temperature in the room drop. Ethan opened his mouth, probably to deliver some smug comeback, but before he could, another voice boomed out from behind the crowd. Professor Henry Collins, their former mentor, and the only person those three still feared. Ungrateful little rats, he barked as he walked up the aisle, his cane tapping with authority. Your rise from nobodies to national elites was paid for in full by the Walker family, and this is how you repay them? By slandering Madeline and plotting with Samantha like street thugs. Ryan's jaw dropped. Ethan visibly swallowed. The room was silent, stunned into stillness. And then the final act arrived, two security guards dragging in Samantha and Daniel, disheveled and bound, their luggage torn open to reveal stolen jewelry and gold hidden beneath the clothes. As they were shoved forward, Daniel still had the audacity to sneer at me. You can't force love, Maddie, he spat. You can tie me up, but you can't make me love you. But before I could respond, my father's voice cut across the room like a blade. Marrying my daughter is beneath you? He thundered, stepping into the light like the king he was. Then let me be clear, you three were nothing but foster projects. I gave you my money, my home, my guidance, and this is what you do? Not anymore. Daniel froze, the color draining from his face. Samantha dropped to her knees, tears streaming as she tried to play the sympathy card one last time. Uncle, please. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Maddie has everything. I just wanted a little love. She tried to grab my father's leg, but he stepped back like she was diseased. That's when Matthew turned to the guards and said calmly, Clear the trash. My wife deserves a clean wedding. And just like that, the ceremony continued. Because no matter how much venom they tried to spit, they'd already lost. And in part 4, they're going to find out just how deep karma runs when you bet against a woman who's already lived through hell once. The ceremony resumed as if nothing had happened, but the eyes in the crowd were still darting between the empty aisle and the wreckage left behind by Samantha and the three traitors who once thought they were kings in my life, and I didn't care not anymore because Matthew stood beside me like a shield made of calm steel, fingers still laced with mine, and I could feel the pulse of certainty in his grip, something unshakable, something that finally felt like peace. But just when I thought we could breathe, another twist dropped like a hammer. Professor Collins signaled the guards again, and this time, they dragged in someone I never expected to see again, a bloodied, limping man with sunken cheeks and haunted eyes, and I gasped before I could stop myself. Dr. Richard Hill, the physician who had supposedly died in the same avalanche that became the lie Samantha built her whole false identity on, and he wasn't dead, far from it, just broken and mad with fury as he pointed his trembling, bloody finger at Samantha and shouted, "You think you could get away with burying me in the snow like some lab rat? I saved your damn lives, and she told me to lie, to say it was her. Samantha said she'd make me rich if I backed her up, and when I changed my mind, she tried to kill me." And his voice cracked, his body shook, and then he lunged at her, hands closing around her throat like years of silence had turned into fire in his veins. And for a second, no one moved, not Daniel, not Ethan, not Ryan. They just stood there staring like ghosts, watching their own downfall unfold in slow motion, because deep down, they knew it was true. And when the guards finally pulled him off, Samantha was gasping, her hair torn, her makeup streaked with tears and mascara like a melting porcelain mask, and she looked around for someone, anyone, to believe her, but there was no one left to fool, not even Daniel, whose eyes were locked on my arm, on the thin white scar barely visible unless you knew where to look, and he stepped forward, fingers reaching for it like it was proof that everything he ever believed had been a lie. And when he touched it, he dropped to his knees like the air had been knocked out of him, whispering, "It was you. It was really you who saved us." And Ethan crumbled right after him, burying his face in his hands, and Ryan, ever the proud one, stood frozen, jaw tight, until he finally muttered, "We were wrong. We were all wrong." And I didn't say anything, because what was left to say? They had taken my past, my reputation, my family, and they gave it all to Samantha like I was some villain in a story she wrote herself. And now they wanted to cry about it like guilt could turn back time? Not a chance. So I turned to Matthew, leaned against him just slightly, and he understood without a word, snapping his fingers for the guards, who stepped forward like hounds off the leash, dragging the three of them out one by one despite their begging, their apologies, their pathetic attempts at redemption. And then Samantha tried one last time, crawling toward Daniel, clutching at his ankles like a woman possessed, sobbing about love and memories and destiny. But Daniel, that fool, shook her off like she was a stain on his boots and hissed, "Don't touch me. Oh, used me. You lied to all of us, and you almost killed the one person who actually cared." And the slap of truth hit her so hard, she stopped crying altogether, just stared blankly as the guards cuffed her and carried her out like discarded garbage. And the moment the church doors shut behind them, it was like the room took its first real breath. The weight of years of deceit and betrayal finally lifted, and without missing a beat, the officiant cleared his throat and said, "Shall we begin again?" And this time, there were no interruptions, no whispered doubts, just me and Matthew exchanging vows under warm golden lights, with my father watching from the front row, his hands clasped and his eyes watery with something that looked like real happiness. And as Matthew slid the ring onto my finger, I didn't just feel married, I felt free, like I had rewritten fate with my own hands. And what they don't know yet, what no one in that crowd could even imagine, is that in the next chapter, I'm going to show the world what it really means when the forgotten daughter of the Walker family finally stops playing nice and starts taking back everything she lost, one clean, calculated move at a time. The second wedding Matthew held for me wasn't about saving face or silencing gossip. It was about something deeper, quieter, something that felt like healing, because this time it was just close family, no eyes full of doubt, no whispers waiting for scandal, just a warm garden under a soft spring sky, strings of lights overhead, and Matthew at my side, looking at me like I was the only person who'd ever existed. And when his mother took my hands in hers, eyes red and voice trembling, she said, "Thank you, Madeline, for being willing to marry my disappointing son." I almost laughed through the lump in my throat, but then she added, "And I want to tell you the truth about those rumors, his marriage, the 3 children, all of it." And my heart froze for a second, even though I had long stopped caring about what people whispered behind my back. but what she said next hit me like a thunderclap. It was a cover for a covert operation. Maddie was never really married. Those kids were. Rescues from a trafficking ring, and Matthew's still. She trailed off, her cheeks red. Well, let's just say he's yours, untouched. And I blinked at her, then at Matthew, who looked like he'd rather disappear than hear his mother talk about his virtue in front of everyone, and that was when it hit. Mayhay wasn't some savior who swooped in to rescue me. He had been waiting for me all along, and the memory came flooding back like a slap from time itself, the one I had buried so deep I almost thought I made it up these summers when my father was too busy to watch me and left me with the neighbors. The boy next door with sharp eyes and sunburned arms who let me steal his popsicles and kiss his cheek just because I thought he was the prettiest thing I'd ever seen, and how I used to run after him shouting, "I'm gonna marry you someday, you'll see." And how I'd forgotten all about him when the world got big and heavy and complicated. But he hadn't forgotten not a single word, not a single touch. In when I finally asked him that night, after the guests had gone, and we were lying side by side in the quiet dark, "Why are you so good to me?" He traced my fingers with his and whispered, "Because you were mine before you even knew who I was, and I've just been waiting for you to remember." And I remembered everything, including how unfair it was that fate gave me such a cruel first life. But how lucky I was to get a second one, and in that moment I understood that even the worst pain couldn't stop the right person from finding you. Not when love was written into your bones before your story even began. And after the wedding, as news of what happened at the ceremony began to ripple through the city like wildfire, I heard whispers at galas and fundraisers about how the mighty had fallen, how Daniel, Ethan, and Ryan lost their reputations overnight, stripped of their titles, blacklisted from every position my father once opened doors for, and how the three golden boys of Boston were now nothing more than three bitter men clinging to their own egos. And as for Samantha, well, karma came for her with teeth after being disowned, abandoned, and betrayed by the very men she thought would worship her forever. She turned to desperation, spiraling into debt, addiction, and finally vanishing without a trace after setting her apartment on fire in a failed insurance scam that left nothing behind but scorched brick and silence. And when I heard that news, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just reached across the table and took Matthew's hand in mine, because justice had already been served and revenge didn't taste as sweet as the peace I had now. And when I looked up, my father was watching me from across the garden, nodding slowly, like he finally saw the woman I'd become, no longer the tragic bride or the daughter to be pitied, but someone who had fought tooth and nail to take back her name, her dignity, and her life. And in the next chapter, the last one, I would finally let go of the pain for good and live the life I should have had all along with the man who never stopped waiting for me, and a future no longer chained to the past. It's strange how quiet the world feels when the noise finally dies, when the battles are over, when the masks drop and you're left not with enemies or ghosts but simply with yourself. And now, months after the chaos, the betrayals, the wedding sabotage, and the rise and fall of the people who once defined my pain, I find myself waking up each morning not with dread but with something softer, something warm. I wake up to Matthew's arm draped over my waist, to the smell of his terrible but earnest attempts at breakfast, to the ridiculous little notes he sticks to the bathroom mirror that say things like, "You're the reason I believe in second chances," and yes, I still remember the popsicle you stole. And while the world outside still spins, still whispers, still talks about Madeline Walker's fall and resurrection, inside this home, in this life I reclaimed with my own bare hands, there's only peace and love, and a man who never stopped believing in the girl I forgot I used to be. And every now and then when I go out to the garden, I see my father watching me the way he used to watch my mother when she was alive, not with worry or control, but with pride, the kind of pride that says, "You've made it." And I think maybe I have. Maybe I finally did, because while the rest of the world has moved on or pretended nothing happened, I've learned to live in the quiet, to embrace the present, to stop checking over my shoulder waiting for knives that no longer exist. And Matthew? He treats me like I'm made of gold and glass at the same time, Not because he thinks I'm breakable, but because he understands what it took for me to stand again, and sometimes I catch him looking at me when he thinks I'm not paying attention, with that soft smile that makes it feel like all the trauma was worth it just to get here. And when I ask him why he still looks at me like he's afraid I'll vanish, he just pulls me close and says, "Because even now, part of me still can't believe you're real." And I get it, I really do, cause there are moments when I catch myself in the mirror and hardly recognize the woman staring back, not because I've changed physically, but because the rage is gone, the grief is settled, and for the first time since I can remember, I'm not chasing approval or fighting for scraps. I'm just living, loving, existing on my own terms, and while I don't forget what they did, Daniel, Ethan, Ryan, Samantha, I don't carry their weight anymore either. They're just names in chapters that no longer belong to me, and I heard, through some old acquaintances, that Daniel blew through what little savings he had tried to start over and ended up bartending at some dive out in Nevada. Ethan tried running for a local office and got laughed off the ballot, and Ryan got caught in a Ponzi scheme and is now banned from even opening a checking account. And as for Samantha, well, no one's seen her since the fire. And maybe that's for the best, because she built her life on lies, and it burned to ash the same way it was born. But I don't wish them harm not anymore, because they already lost the moment they thought my silence meant surrender. And now, as I sit here on the porch of the lake house Matthew bought me just because I once mentioned wanting to paint somewhere quiet, I look at the sun setting across the water, his jacket draped over my shoulders, and I think about how lucky I am that God, fate, the universe, whatever you want to call it, gave me a second shot. A chance to rewrite the ending, to marry not the most powerful man, not the richest, not the one with the flashiest smile, but the one who never once looked away when I was broken, who remembered a promise made under a summer sky and held it in his heart until I was ready to remember it too. And if that's not love, if that's not the real story behind every happily ever after, then I don't know what is, because for the first time, this life is mine and no one gets to rewrite it but me.